Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sparking Logic webinar series. Today, our topic is managing complexity in automated decisions. I'm Caroline Berlioz-Matignon. I'm going to start with some orientation on our webinar technology. First of all, the webinar is in listen-only mode. If you do have any questions, and we will be taking questions at the end of the sessions, please type them into the chat window. During the presentation, we recommend that you maximize your screen, and you can do that using the icon, the square with the 4 arrows as you mouse over your screen. And finally, the slides will be available. If you would like to receive a copy of them, please contact us, and we'll be happy to send it to you. So with that, let me get started. So I'm Caroline Berlioz-Matignon. I'm one of the co-founders of Sparkling Logic and the Chief Product Officer. I've been in the decision management space for a long time, starting with expert systems, then business rules and decision management, and now prescriptive analytics. So I've been really using a lot of business rules and predictive analytics and optimization technologies throughout my career. So instead of spending time talking about what I do, I would like to jump into our topic of managing complexity in automated decisions. And this is really what decision management is all about. What do we mean by complexity? Well, typically, when you apply your business rules to automate decisions, those business rules will be applied consistently. By definition, that's what you want. You want your business rules to just apply consistently across all the different transactions. But there are some times where your decision logic might be different. You want to treat your customers or your transactions differently on occasion. So you want to pick and choose which one are the business rules that apply to that specific customer. And that is what we call exceptions. So to me, during this presentation, we will talk about complexity and exceptions as being the same thing. But there are different ways that you can see what exceptions are, and we will be looking at 3 different purposes. The first one is probably the most intuitive. It's when your business logic needs to be handled differently by segments. And it might be because different geographies will have different regulations, different requirements. And this is why your business rules in general apply across the board, but there might be exceptions for each one of those segments. It doesn't have to be all about geography. It could be obviously about customer segments within a portfolio. It might be about different lines of business for your company, and so on. But we're going to be jumping into that topic shortly. The second perspective is not so much about the business rules themselves, but it's about how you manage them. There might be some complexity, some differences, some exceptions in the way you handle and you manage your business rules. We would like all of you to manage your business rules into a business rules repository as part of a business rules management system. That's what decision management technology is great for. But the reality is that there might be some spreadsheets or some other documents that are shared across the enterprise, and that will be our second topic. And then the third perspective is not so much about the decision logic itself, but it's about what it applies to and the data that we're going to pull in order to make decisions. So it might so the exception refers to the decision logic that applies to different data sources. So most of the time you will use one, but once in a while you will use something else in addition to or instead of the primary data source that you are looking at. So those will be our 3 perspectives for today. And just a credit to the presentation itself, this is actually based on the presentation that I did last week at BBC, Building Business Capability show in Vegas, in conjunction with Equifax. So a lot of the use cases that will be presented throughout this presentation come from our customer. And unfortunately, today I'm presenting on my own, but I will try to give a good description of what their use cases are. So let's focus on the first one, which we have called the multiple portfolios. So this is when your decision logic is different based on the segment that it applies to. And I talked about different geographies. In the use case that we will use, we will look at different customer segments. So those are different examples of what the portfolio might be. It might be about products, it might be about customers, which will be our use case. It might be about industries or verticals that need to have rules that apply differently. So the reason we do want to have global policies might be that at the top level, your guidelines will be the same across the board. If you're referring to bankruptcy declines, this is not going to differ from one industry to another. The age requirements might be the same across the board, but then there will be some regulatory compliance aspects that can be common, and then some exceptions that will be specific to your different segments. So the reason this is something that we are passionate about, that we want to talk about today, is that this is something that is difficult to implement. It's not so difficult if you have only one or two segments that you look at, but as you multiply the number of segments, what we have seen as being quote unquote the easy design has been to just duplicate your business rules. You have your business rules that you write for segment A, and this is what I have illustrated here in the diagram. But then if you duplicate them for segment B and segment C and segment D, etc., all the way to the end of the alphabet, you're going to end up with just an exaggerated proliferation of your business rules. I remember a customer having just probably 1,000, maybe 2,000 business rules for each segment, which was in their case each customer configuration. But because of the number of customers they have, which is a good problem to have, they ended up with 1.5 million business rules. Can you imagine managing 1.5 million business rules? So first of all, that creates a great potential for mistakes. When you copy and paste, you might forget something. But mostly the maintenance is a nightmare. When you haven't go back to those 1.5 million business rules, having to make a slight change, you have to think for each one of these configuration, is this change applicable, or is it irrelevant for some reason because of some other override, some slight differences for that specific configuration. And this is why we think this is difficult, because what is simple and easy to do is actually it can turn very quickly into a nightmare. In the case of Equifax, to be very specific of specific configuration, so Equifax provides has a platform called Interconnect that provides approval, credit approval decisions for customers. So if you are a furniture customer, you're going to engage with a financial services institution, and they will provide financing options for someone who wants to buy an expensive piece of furniture, maybe do remodeling throughout the house. For this credit line, they will have their specific guidelines. They may have an appetite to be very aggressive in the credit they extend to their customers, or they may be very conservative. And if this bank has other customers in the oil industry, their appetite might be, once again, quite different, and maybe their thresholds will be different, because getting a gas card is obviously not going to be at the same level of exposure as getting a full living room update. And once again, there might be also jewelry clients that once again has different configuration. In the way that Equifax has organized their business rules, they really looked at what was an easy way, or what would be an easy way to have in common those global policies. And in their case, they did have underage requirements, pre-screening, bureau hits, and bankruptcy decline. being common across the board. So the bank will decide how they want to handle all of this level of exposure and risk, because they are actually taking the risk. In this case, we anonymize the name of the bank because we don't want to expose it, but this is actually a real implementation. So then they do have all the different industries: furniture, oil, and jewelry. And then they have all the different client configurations. And you can see that all the business rules look similar. They will have a slightly different score cut. So client 1 is at 620 of the risk score, while client 2 is going down to 590. So a little bit more appetite for risk. And then in a credit line assignment, it might be very simple, just a couple of cells: low risk, high risk. Or it might be very complicated. And you can see in the oil industry, there is one credit line assignment with 400 cells. So that can be very detailed in the way they assign the credit lines. So that gives you a picture at a higher level as to how things can be organized. We still haven't explained how we're going to get away with not duplicating everything. But I just want to drill down and give you one specific example, and then we'll see how that gets implemented. So for this jewelry client example, so once again, a lot of global policies are inherited. So you can see in this decision tree that the underage requirement is common, is the one that is inherited from the top level. And then the pre-screening, and then the bureau hit, and the bankruptcy rule, all of that is something that comes from the global policies. But as we apply the data to these jewelry clients, and you can see here one example of a specific example for John Doe to be applicable, you can see eventually that this jewelry client has decided to customize the scorecard and the credit line assignments. And this is what is below the dotted line on the right. I'm not going to go into the details of this specific configuration. Instead, I'm going to show you in action how all these things work together. So let me show you the technique first, the concept first, and then I will show you as part of our smart decision management system how all of it works. So at the top level, we talked about the bank having global policies, and then having segmentations for the different industries, and then having the client configuration. One point I want to make before I jump into the how it is done is the fact that the nice thing about this organization with layers is that you can assign the responsibility at the right level. So you don't have to have just one business analyst being in charge of the entire configuration for everyone. Typically, it's a team working together, but you might have, in addition to having someone that is specialized in jewelry versus oil versus furniture, you could also have a business analyst at the top level. Maybe that person that's really good at saying no is the one that you want at the top level, working in conjunction with a business analyst. So they can define what's the global appetite for risk for the bank, and then analyst B can be the one that will do the configuration, that will override some of the configuration as appropriate, obviously based on their credentials. This is actually something that I want to emphasize as being very valuable, because if you want to change something at the top level, at the global policy level, and you want to test it, you don't want to deploy it right now, you just want to run a simulation and see how is that going to change your exposure as a bank, then you can have business analyst A make this change at the global policy level, and just run the simulation with all the different configuration very quickly with just one change. Well, if you had the duplication, you would have to do this change n times for each one of your client configuration, which could be very tedious. And then you have to remember to revert back for each one of them. Again, this greater risk of to make mistakes. Other industries, we've seen that. I mean, that's not specific to Equifax. In healthcare, typically for a medical insurance, you will have deductibles that are negotiated by employers. In insurance, there will be state regulations that will tell you you can go what we call the experience period, which is how far back in time you can look at how many accidents or violations people had. Some states will say it's okay to do it over 5 years. Some states will have regulation that it's not legal. You can only look at the past 3 years. So you want to obviously be in compliance. In the Internet of Things, it might be about the cost of managing your technicians or your equipment that might vary from plant to plant, from installation to installation. So the way it works, finally, you do have your generic rules. That's the global policies that we saw in the diagram that was provided by Equifax. And when you set up a new customer segment, let's assume that each one of those icons for the business rules represents 1,000 business rules. Then when you set up a customer A, you could say 2,000 of the rules will be the same as the generic policies, but then there will be 1,000 of them that will need to be overridden. So I need to just change a parameter, add or remove some of the conditions, or change the levels, the credit line assignment, for example. Another type of change may be to remove some rules. This rule is not legal in that segment, in that geography, or it might be that it's not applicable to my VIP customers. So you may want to override by moving some of the rules, or you may want to override by adding more rules. And this is obviously something that you can mix and match. You don't have to say, oh, for this segment, I can only do a twist or remove or add. You can do some twists, remove some, and add some. But the nice thing is that instead of having 9,000 rules that you have to write, you really only have to author 1,000 that were modified for segment A, 1,000 that were removed for segment B, and 1,000 that were added for segment C. So it's a third of the work with only 3 segments. Now imagine if you have 1,000 segments, that would be a huge difference. And mostly the value is when you update the policy, because each one of the segments will know what its configuration is. So with that, let me show you in action means so that it's not too virtual. So in order to this concept of layering the level of responsibilities and using overrides for the different segments, I'm going to use our auto quote project. So SMART, just to take a step back, is our decision management system provided by Sparkling Logic, and it's currently running on the cloud. It could be on premise. And it allows you to have a complete view of your business rules without a lot of setup. So you can simply create new decisions, upload some data, and start experimenting with them. So in this AutoQuote, which is an insurance underwriting project, we decided to have some global policies at the top level within this decision, but then we created a derived decision for California. And you can see here this little icon that shows like a network is the one illustrating that it's actually derived from AutoQuote. And then for California, I created another segment for San Francisco. But the nice thing is that when I create new segments, all I need to do is to create a new decision. So I may want to create AutoQuote for San Diego, which would be another variation within California. So here I'm going to say I want to derive from California, and now I have some modifications that are specific to San Diego for some reason. And when I say OK, that is the only setup required for me to create these new segments. And I'm ready to start editing it so that I can simply apply my business rules or modify my business rules with the additions and the removals. Actually, one thing that we do have in Smarts in this decision page is 3 different panes that work together. So I'm going to give you a little bit of orientation so that you can see how that works. So we do have on the bottom right our decision pane, which is where all of our business rules are. This is where I can see all the global policies that are inherited from the top level. And then I do have a document pane that is taking half of my screen where I can see my actual transactions. So I just need to do a little setup. Let me see. Oh, I do have the document. So let's do a bit of setup so that I can select my renewal transactions. And now I can see how the rules apply to actual transaction. So I have a data sample that I can go through, just 100 documents, so not that many, but I can use that to just look at the different transactions and how the rules for San Diego applies to this document group. And then on the right side, I do have a dashboard where I can see the information in aggregate. So I can see that so far, without making any modifications, 79% of my transactions are approved and 21 are being referred. So let's focus on the business rules. You can see that they are read-only, so I cannot make modifications by mistake, but I can see them and they actually apply. But if I wanted to make a modification, and let me do that real quick, I can see the decision flow, which is like a workflow for the transactions. Was every time I receive a transaction, I will verify that I have all the data I need, maybe compute some variables, apply some rejection rules, and then go into tier assessment. And if everything goes well, then I will rate the transactions and issue the quote. So I'm going to focus on this tier assessment. And I start modifying the rules directly. So if I wanted to change my high risk rule, which I see applies to Joe, this first document, because it has a green ball, I could say I would like to override these inherited rules, this inherited rule. And I say this one is high risk for San Diego, and I'm going to change the average age. So maybe I want to say it's not going to be up to 25, but it's going to be up to 23. I believe that's going to create a gap into my business rules, and we can see that because we do have a dashboard. So now I can run. Let me just take a quick snapshot so that we can compare. So this one was the global policies only. And now if I run and execute, I can see that my decision outcome is, let's see if it's changing. Yes, it's changing because my approve rate went from 79 to 72. And now I have those 7 that are valid. They have all the data they need, but they could not be authored because I do have a gap. So obviously, I could go into my verification tool to get the information that there is a gap in my business rules for age, or I could just go and fix that. But the nice thing is that you can just override any business rule. And let's see, for maybe your input verification, I'm going to make another change just to show you how easy it would be. So for example, if the phone information is relevant in that state, I can say this is going to be overridden. So now it becomes read-write. And now I can say I want to disable the rule. And now this no phone requirement, or the phone requirement, is not going to be applicable in San Diego because everybody has email in San Diego, I suppose. So it's that easy to twist a rule, to remove a rule. And if you want to add one, then you can just do it from here and create a new rule and add it into the system. But what I want to show is that even though we see all the rules and all the rules apply from the global policy level, if I try to save, you can see that now, obviously, my project has changed because it has a new decisions in it. My renewals have changed because the rules have applied to it, but only the 2 rules in high risk for San Diego, and the no phone requirement or the phone requirement that was removed are the rules that are being saved. So I'm not copying. I don't have to maintain those rules at that all the rules at the San Diego level. I only have those two overrides that I need to manage from now on. One thing I want to show is, let's go back to our tier assessment really quickly before we move on. But I want to show you that you can compare really quick what it used to be and what you changed it to. And if you had different levels of overrides, if California was different from the global policy, you will see all three levels. You will have access to all three levels. You will be able to compare how things or where things are being overridden. But that is really a great way, we believe, to manage those overrides without having this nightmare of duplication. So let's go back to the slides. And I'm going to rebuild it and to the next one. So the lesson learned was that really the customer setup has been accelerated significantly, because now we just need to make those two changes for San Diego and not, modifying every single rule or copying every single rule. But the most important benefit has been on the maintenance side. If you need to make a change, maybe on the age requirements, you can do that at the global policy level. It will apply to everybody, to everyone in California, to everyone specifically in San Francisco or in San Diego. But if San Diego has overridden that, then they will not get the update. If they have not overridden it, then they will get the update. And I want to reemphasize also the point about responsibilities and how you can really share really the work between the different business analysts. I think that for too long we've been using a divide and conquer approach to the business rules management. And, the less we overlap on the maintenance, the less likely we'll have problems with business rules. But I do believe there is benefit to having a team working together because of the different skills, because of the different areas of responsibilities, the role they play in the organization, having all this collaboration, something that's very valuable. So that really illustrate the first point, the first perspectives on how to create those different variations of the same decision, but seen from the different perspectives of San Diego or San Francisco, or some other geography, looking at segmented business rules. Perspective is about the management of the business rules, and when the business rules are handled externally. If you had asked any of us 10 years ago, would have said, no, all of your business rules need to go in the business rules repository, and it doesn't make sense to have it in some other places. But the reality is that a lot of people are using Excel. Excel is such an easy tool to use. You don't need any training. You can just create a new document and start organizing your thoughts or documenting your requirements. And this is something that we've seen many, many times as being the quote-unquote primary BRMS for executing business rules in the case of Equifax credit policies. And it's really easy to do outside of a tool, and then to share with a team via email, and having the right people approve that the spreadsheet is correct. We have some examples. We've seen some example with Equifax where these spreadsheets have been used and abused, I would say, because the size of these spreadsheets could grow significantly. So obviously the benefits are on the low cost because everybody has Excel, and the fact that rules are documented, better than being in the head of the expert, or better than being buried into a policy manual. And the changes are really easy to do because everybody knows how to author something in Excel. If it's all about filling up the spreadsheet. But the issues are really in terms of testing that everything is complete, everything is correct. You can read it, but as it grows, then it becomes more challenging to make sure that everything is actually working perfectly and not missing any ranges or anything like that, like we saw in the previous example. Also, the compliance concerns are some of the issues that bubbled up, and also the tracking, being able to know exactly, is that the latest version of it? It's just a document you receive, and even though I think a lot of us are good at adding a version 1, version 2 label on the name of the spreadsheet, well, sometimes an edit can happen on the wrong version, or there was a new version that was sent out by email, but you're editing the wrong one. And catching all of these issues is something that is difficult if you're only managing spreadsheets externally. So the solution that Equifax came up with was really to be able to import those tables, especially when they were large. Let me go back to slides. They had some spreadsheets, and I have seen them, so I know it's true, that had tens of tabs, and on each tab they had tables that were, as big as hundreds of thousands of cells. So really, really large data being managed into it. So being able to import automatically is something that is a great benefit. And there are two strategies to that. There are some cases where it's okay to throw away the spreadsheet. You used it as a documentation mechanism, and from that point on, going forward, all the rules will be managed within the BRMS. So that was more of an initial input, and that was a tool that was used to collaborate on the capture and the documentation of the business rules. And we see also some other use cases where the spreadsheet is going to stay alive. The spreadsheet is going to be the main mechanism for capturing the values, and it has to be synchronized with the business rules on a regular basis. So this is where you want to refresh those business rules. So we've seen it being used because of the approval process, using email so easy. We actually have seen even some people that are capturing the business rules within the BRMS, and then they are exporting the spreadsheet and using that for approval. So it could work both ways. But we've seen also some other use cases where the amount of data is really big, and maybe it's a spreadsheet, maybe it's a database, and you don't want to bring everything in because it would be too big. So that might be a slight variation on this use case where the spreadsheet is alive. It might be alive, but it might be also linked to directly. And also because the data keeps changing. We have customers that are using smarts for exchange rates, and obviously the foreign currencies keep changing. So you may not want to bring this lookup table directly into the tool. You want to keep it external to system. So the way it works, and that relates back to the two use cases we talked about, the one where you use the spreadsheet and then you throw it away, and the one where you use the spreadsheet and then you keep using the spreadsheet. So in the first case, when you bring in the spreadsheet or database table, doesn't have to be necessarily Excel, if you're using this one-time import into the tool, and then you're not going to use the spreadsheet anymore, what we recommend as being a mechanism is to use DMN, which is a standard, is a decision modeling notation. And that is a great technique, a great methodology, or decision modeling. Decision models are a great technique to be able to capture and document your business rules. And this is something that you can do within our ecosystem using Pencil. So Pencil is a standalone tool for creating those decision models. and then that will fit directly into Smarts, obviously, if you're using that. If that's something that you're interested in learning more about, because I'm not going to talk about it further more than that, there will be a webinar next week on Thursday that you can attend. If you do attend this decision modeling webinar next week, you will be entered for a drawing for an Apple Watch. So I do recommend to attend, because I think it sounds like a really cool tool or toy. Pencil is a great tool too, don't take me wrong. Both of them are kind of cool. But if you use DMN as a standard outside of the Sparkling Logic ecosystem, whether you use another DMN tool or whether you use DMN as a methodology within Excel, which you're absolutely entitled to do, then we can import natively this DMN spreadsheet into our world. And typically that will be where you cut the cord with a spreadsheet, and then you keep evolving those business rules in the decision management system. If you're going to keep these business rules around, then typically you would want to create a black box, because it doesn't necessarily make sense to go and see what the business rules are. If you see them, you will want to make changes to them. It's just too natural. So we do have a black box import where you can just link to that database or to that spreadsheet and just execute it. Have some semantic to say this is how it applies, and use the actual table in memory as part of our system. You can see, in a way, what the content is, but it's not exposed as business rules and managed as business rules, which is what the white box strategy would be. And then we have, very similar lookup model, but one that remains external. When this data keeps changing all the time, you just want to have this call out to the external table. But the nice thing is that whichever technique you want to use, then you can simply execute that lookup table into the system. So let me show you. I'm not going to show you a Google use case, because we're going to run out of time if we do that. But I can show you what this DMN is, because this is something that is external. It might be something that you are already doing within your organization. So let me open this DMN example. This one is actually the example that is documented in the DMN specifications. It comes with a glossary, so you can see here all the different attributes of the applicant, the attributes of the request, etc. And this is part of the requirement that we need to document this glossary. And we have different tabs that will illustrate the different tables in the model. So we have a bureau strategy table. We have bureau call type table. These tables are not very big, but we've done some imports for customers that had about 3,000 rows in the table, so they can really grow significantly. So I can keep going. Here you would see all the different tables. So let me close that, and I will go back to Smart. Let's close this project. I don't need auto quote anymore. So I'm going to go back to our home, and I'm going to create a project from scratch. In your case, maybe you already have a project and you just need to bring the decisions. In my case, I don't have the project created yet, so I'm going to create everything. The glossary is going to turn into a form, which is our terminology for the object model or data model, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to create, obviously, the decisions. So I go into this DMN example and drag and up the file into our hot area. Drop it. It starts importing everything. So it's creating the Smarts project based on the of this spreadsheet. And you can see that the DMN model and glossary are going to be imported. I'm going to create a brand new form because I don't have one that I want to reuse. based on the glossary. And then there are 2 decision models in that spreadsheet. So I'm going to import both of them, bureau strategy and routing. So this is going to run new project from scratch that I didn't have before. Let me clear the message just to say everything went well. And I have the 2 decisions. And when I click on the decision, obviously it didn't need data. I don't have transactions that I can apply to, unfortunately. But I would be able to just create new transactions from scratch just by typing the value in. If I wanted to test the business rules in the context of data. What I'm going to do, because I don't have any data, is to swap my document pane and my decision pane so that we can focus on the business rules that were imported. So I'm going to move to the side, and then I'm going to take all of the real estate. Since we don't have any data, why should we look at it? So each one of the decision model turn into here a decision flow. And that's kind of looking at your decision model upside down if you're used to DMN. But eventually we need to figure out the bureau strategy. In order to figure out the bureau strategy, we need to look at the bureau call type and the eligibility, and then each one is taking inputs from the different levels all the way. Looking at the business rule, you can find all the business rules that we had previously in the spreadsheet as a table. So I could just turn any of these rule sets here into a table so that they will look, like the tables we had in the spreadsheet. Some of them were a little bit empty because they are looking at different aspects. And some of them might be more fully completed, filled in. But that shows you just the nature of the spreadsheets that you have imported. So the difference here is that now the business rules are, or the decision model have been translated into business rules. So each business rules is managed independently, and we can make changes as needed in this environment. Again, representations. We do have also a decision tree, and each one of these representation is read-write, so you don't have to always go back to your textual rules. You could just expand each one of the nodes and start making modifications, or you can add more nodes into your representation. Or you could look at this graph. In this case, all 3 branches are different, so I'm going to end up with 3 simple graphs, but that will be a nice representation if you were in charge of compliance and you want to see what are all the ways that I get to a decline. So here I can focus on this one action, and I can see all the paths that lead to this decline operation. So that's the value of using this DMN import into the environment instead of the black box. If you had the black box, very quickly, here one step into your decision flow might be your spreadsheet, and then you will have just a mapping to say this column in my spreadsheet maps to these attributes into my form, my data model, and this is where the action will go, probably to set the bureau strategy in this example. So let me move on to slides because I want to break your time, make sure I'm going to end late. So to summarize on this perspective, which is about complexity in the management, big lesson learned, spreadsheets are not going away. So we learned that the hard way, and instead of denying it, which we did for a long time, I think that now we're looking for more ways to really work together and leverage this investment that has been made by the organization in these spreadsheets. And the great value is that once they are imported, then they can be managed. So whether it's at the row level, at the table level, you get versioning, you get audit tracking, you can do the testing, you can see right away if I had the data sample, I could see what's the business performance of these business rules. And if you keep them as a lookup table instead of transforming them into business rules, you can really get a huge performance boost in runtime performance. The last perspective for this presentation is the gray area, and this one might be a little bit different from what you have been used to. So this is dealing with the different data sources, and we've seen this perspective being used a lot by organizations that are analytic savvy, where they do manage data as their assets, and where they need to make decisions based on data. So what does it mean to really manage the data differently? So to try to make it simple is that there might be some data that you use all the time. So your transaction data is going to be your yellow folder, but then there might be some cases where you don't have enough data to make a conclusive decision. So you want to bring in more data to complement the yellow folder. So maybe sometimes you're going to get the red folder, and very exceptionally, you might get the blue folder, or it might be one or the other, or it might be that the blue folder will replace the yellow folder. So it might vary from transaction to transaction. Back to the idea we had initially with the different segments, there may be that one data source that you use to make decisions is very good for the furniture industry, but it's not good for jewelry industry for some reason. So you may want to pick and choose what kind of data you're going to bring in. Case of Equifax, to try to describe it simply, it's like looking at your good apples and your bad apples. When you're looking at people applying for credit, typically if the risk score is good, then most likely they will all be good risk. So each circle represents a person. Obviously, there might be a few in this group that will be bad, but you will have very few of the black circles with a higher credit risk. As you go down the risk score, you will get more and more of the black and less of the white. But there is a level, there is a cut for your risk score where you know that above that cut, it's a no-brainer. You're most likely going to get someone that is good. So it should be an automatic approve. Below this cut, it's a no-brainer that your chances of getting a good apple is pretty bad. So it should be an automatic decline. But then there is the gray area where it could be either, and maybe it's a 50-50, depending on your appetite for risk again, maybe a 50-50% chance to get a black one. But this is also the high value. This is how one business can really differentiate from another business by handling this gray area much better and being able to extract the white and leave the bad alone. In order to make decisions, one approach is to bring more data sources. If we are not able to make decisions based on the data that we have, let's bring in more data. And obviously, Equifax has, I think it's 400 different data sources that they manage. So they have a lot of choices as to which data can be brought in, obviously at a cost, but that's their business to sell the data. So we don't want to necessarily bring the data in upfront because there is a cost associated with it. So you only want to do it as needed. If you are in a gray area, then you will go and get these extra data sources brought in so that you can make a better decision and really differentiate between the white and the black in the gray area. This is specific to Equifax and their credit approval, but we've seen very similar techniques being used in different places. So risk management is really the Equifax use case. In claims processing, there are some times where you can say yes or no to the claim very quickly. But there is again some gray area where you need to go back and bring historical claims, so that you can see if you've reached the deductibles or anything that will help you make a final decision. In fraud detection, there might be some data sources that are more exotic, less that have not been vetted yet, where you want to experiment with that. Social data is a very good example. As part of big data, some of them are very reliable and some of them are not, and it might be reliable in one vertical, but not, or one geography, but not another geography. So the way it works is that you will process based on your yellow folder. You got some data, you can start processing the transaction. But if you reach a status that is not conclusive, and in this example, it will be a manual process, then you will figure out that you need more data. So you can bring in whichever data source is appropriate. So the business rules will dictate, based on where I'm at, based on the characteristic of this transaction, I need the red data source to complement my yellow data source. And then you can submit again. And then this time the decision service can come to a happy conclusion and approve the transaction, because this person was actually a white in the gray area. I am not going to go into a demonstration because we are running out of time on this aspect, but I think this is something that is very interesting to explore from two different perspectives. The one is about just bringing more data in, which is probably an easier use case to understand. But the other one is about playing games, if you will, with your data, and try, if you have one data source that you like, that has been tested, proven through time, then you're going to use this one most of the time. But if there is a new unvetted data source that you want to try out and see over time if the quality of this data source is improving, then you can do a champion challenger approach. And this is where you can play with this technique. And just 5% of the time, you're going to try this additional data source, maybe in addition to or maybe instead of the red folder. And then you can see over time, if it starts performing, then you're going to shift your investment from the red to the blue folder and start relying more on this new data source, maybe cheaper, maybe free, maybe more readily accessible, whatever the reason is and the interest is, or maybe just because it's better quality. Obviously, business performance will improve if you're using better quality data. The lesson learned is that you can really improve the quality of your decisions in this gray area. So you can push, in this case, you can increase your sales when maintaining your target loss rates, because you're not investing people reviewing those manual referrals all the time. But with the same investment, you can cherry pick automatically those white apples or good apples that are in the gray area, and that lowers your cost to acquire, obviously. The champion challenger approach that I was just talking about, that allows you to try new data sources or to just be more diversified in terms of which data sources you are using. And in the end, you really increase customer satisfaction, because even though people don't like to be told no when they apply for credit, they would rather be told no than maybe. Having those manual processes and people reviewing everything to eventually say no is something that people usually don't like. They would rather have, instant response. It's a yes or no, and then I can move on, and that increased the automation rates. Just to summarize, so there are very different ways to look at complexity, to look at exceptions, whether it's within the business logic itself, whether it's the way we manage the business logic, or whether it is what the business logic applies to. You may have a use case that's using one type of exceptions, maybe two types of exceptions, or maybe three types of exceptions. So the conclusion on that I want to recommend is that one size fits all, just having one approach to managing the same business rules for everyone to the same data is probably not sufficient. You might need to look at different techniques, and hopefully you are intrigued enough to continue the conversation and learn more about the different ways we can handle complexity. We have just a few minutes left, so I would like to take a few questions. Hopefully you had a chance to type your questions into the chat window, and then I will let you. Just if you're dropping off from the presentation, I want to thank you before I start taking the questions. I would encourage you to try a free trial of the product so that you can see all of these working live on your own. We do have some regular webinars and product tours that you can sign up for so that you can get a full presentation of the Smarts product. Read our blog, our newsletter. We love to have interactions and to share our expertise. As I said before, we do have a webinar next week on decision modeling with Pencil, and there is an Apple Watch to win. So that's something that sounds really cool. And early December, we have another webinar on actionable analytics. So I do encourage you to join if you're intrigued by the data aspect and how business rules and analytics can work together. And now I will start taking questions. So let me see. We do have one question about, and let me just read it. When cascading decisions, can we control when changes are propagated? That's actually a good question. Not that I was expecting bad questions. It's a very good question. Yes, when you cascade, if you change your global policy, every single leaf, if you will, in your hierarchy is going to receive that change if there is no override to change it. Typically will propagate automatically. So when you push a change, everybody will see the change. So the next transaction that comes in will have the change. But that's obviously working in conjunction with your lifecycle policy, lifecycle management policy. So it will be your responsibility to push your rules from development to testing to production. And once you reach production, we have seen two different modes of doing that. One, which is the pull, using what we call publication. That's how we push from one environment to the next. And the other mechanism is what we call the library import. So you could be, if you're responsible for one of the furniture stores, you might say furniture store is ready to receive the upgrade. So we're going to pull the change into production, but the oil and jewelry might wait for a month or so to make sure everything is stable, tested before they receive their upgrade. So you can mix and match the pull versus push as part of your lifecycle management strategy. Hopefully that answers your question. Another question is, and let me check the time. That's probably going to be the last one. When you bring more data, does it have to match the same data structure for all data sources? No, it does. I mean, the fact that you're bringing the red or the blue or some other color for the folder, obviously it could go into the same data structure, especially if it's standard. If your industry has standard to rely on, or if your IT organization has done a master data management effort and they have worked on the same data structure across the board, but it's likely that the data structure will be different. And the same way we could override the rules in the cascading projects, the first perspective. You can also cascade the forms themselves and just override that for this segment, for these business rules, you're going to use a slightly different data input. So that's a little bit more technical, but definitely you can mix and match whether they fit or they don't fit. So I want to thank you for your time. We're finishing right on time. And I encourage you to keep the conversation going. If you have more questions, please submit them to us and we will answer them offline. And I look forward to meeting again in our next webinar or through a one-on-one presentation. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.